one of the great prides of my life is that I grew up in an organization called the American Natural Hygiene Society that was led by pioneer physicians like Dr. Herbert Shelton, Dr. William Esser, Dr. Chris Curcio, Dr. Robert Anderson, and then people that they inspired a little later on, including today's Dr. Alan Goldhammer, Dr. Joel Furman, Dr. Frank Sabatino. They all kind of came out of this health movement. But this is like 1948. This is 74 years ago. Next year, we're going to be celebrating our 75th anniversary.
You have more power over your health than what you've been told. This is the Healthy Lifestyle Solutions podcast, and I'm your host, Maya Acosta. I'm passionate about finding healthy lifestyle solutions to support optimal human health. If you're willing to go with me, together we can discover how simple lifestyle choices can help improve our quality of life and increase longevity in a big way. Let's get started. How do you go from being a raw foodist, completely raw, up to the age of 32, to embracing a whole food plant-based lifestyle, and then becoming the president of the National Health Association and editor of the Health Science magazine? Well, my guest, Mark Huberman, is here to tell us his story about how he was born into the raw food diet, and he will tell us about the upcoming annual conference by NHA. That's June 24th through the 26th. And also make sure that you listen to the entire episode because I have a link for you guys. If you're interested in registering for the conference, it's available virtually. I have an affiliate link in the show notes. Please look for it. And I hope to see you virtually. Welcome, Mark.
Good to be here.
I'm happy to have you here. It is an honor. And I want to kind of give a preview to our listeners about some of the things that we'll talk about. So, first, I have your magazine, the Health Science magazine. It is beautiful. I know a couple of people who have been featured here, aside from some of the well known physicians and other people. But yeah, you have great content. It's a beautiful magazine. We're going to talk about that. We'll talk about the vegan cruise that you hold every year and an upcoming conference also that you have every June. We're going to talk about that as well. But first, I would love a little bit of insight as to the recent cruise that you completed in April.
So the little bit of a difference in the cruise, you use the term vegan cruise, and that's got kind of a reputation of the holistic holiday at sea, those kind of big cruises, big ship, and all of that. Ours are a little bit different. Ours are much more intimate. We work with Lisa McCarl of McCarl Travel, who's a life member of the NHA. She's an amazing, her and her husband, she's just an amazing travel agent. And she hooked up with Wanda a few years ago. And in 2019, we did a cruise up the Rhine River in Germany, which is the first time I ever did one of these cruises. And what's very unique about ours, again, it's not a big ship. These are small ships of 150 to 300 people total on the boat. But all of the meals, my wife is in charge of all of the meals. And so she works with the cruise company. So all of our meals are not only whole food, 100% whole food, plant-based, but they're all what we consider the gold standard. They're SOS free, without added oil, salt, oil, or sugar. And they're buffet style. So it's just a wonderful thing to be on sometimes when you go on my experience anyway, on big cruise ships, is you go from port to port to port and you're on ship and it's all about just kind of living on ship mainly and the entertainment. And it's all very nice for people who like to do that. What's nicer about the smaller things that we do is you go from port to port. You go on the river during the evening, you get to someplace, but ours are active cruises. So you get off and you go bicycling, you go touring the parks. It's not just going to the tourist shops and buying your discount gold and things like that, but you come back to the ship and there are all your meals and you don't have to think about it. And it's a great, I guess I would say it's a great sense of community. When we did the 2019 cruise, it was just before COVID. So it was just a perfect time. We went from Frankfurt to Amsterdam and it was wonderful. And then COVID got in the way. And then finally we resumed in this cruise to the Baja that just took place a couple of weeks ago. My wife led that primarily to meet with the chef of that cruise line, to just because it's the same ship and the same chefs that are going to be doing the Alaska cruise that we have coming in August, and the Galapagos in 2023. So she really wanted to make sure they understood that, that whole food plant based is not plant based. It's SOS free. There's no vegetable broth, commercial broth. There's not a bouillon. It's a lot of education. So she did it. People had a great time. I think there were about 50, 60 people on the Baja cruise. And there it'll be all kinds of highlights will be in the upcoming issue of the magazine. But they really are great times. Again, there's a sense of community. I think in my many, many years in this health movement, following this lifestyle can be very lonely. I'm sure if you're like the Hubermans, you guys, you, Dr. Riz, you don't get invited to dinner to a lot of places,
Right.
and a lot of people don't come to your house for dinner. It is a wonderful thing to be with a community of like-minded people. There's even so many people in this movement that are doing it alone, where a husband and wife, maybe it's just the wife or just the husband, or not the children. To be able to come together as a community with like-minded people, all doing the same thing, is pretty special, pretty reinforcing. I like to say when people come to our conferences and now on these cruises, it kind of like recharges your battery. You're really with like-minded people. So that's the secret sauce of what we do. They're smaller, they're intimate. These cruises are active. You don't just sit on a ship. You tour national parks, things like that. You go zip lining if you want to zip line. You do those sort of things, and then your meals are gold standard. So that's the special thing about the NHA cruises that we've developed a pretty good pattern.
Well, I'll tell you, I'm looking forward to possibly joining one of those cruises. My husband and I really did our homework and we said that's what we want because we did do in 2019 the holistic holiday at sea, and it's like a conference, a combination, a conference on in a cruise. And like many people, when we go to conferences, we want to meet our role models, our heroes, and we want to attend all the lectures and learn. But I'll tell you, I was so tired after that cruise. I was exhausted that when it came to port, I sort of wasn't even interested. I just wanted to rest on the ship. What you're talking about is that approach that people like about cruising. Is basically enjoying the environment, enjoying the food, enjoying the locations that you're visiting. You've added the active component to it. But more than anything, yes, you're right. We don't get invited very often to dinner. We don't have, it's not, we don't share a meal every day with individuals who have the same values as us when it comes to eating clean, whole foods as well as SOS free, salt, oil, and sugar free. So, yes, I think we're going to try to, reserve a spot ahead of time because it sounds like your cruises sell out fast.
They do. Yeah, Baja was not a sellout only because I think this was again the first one post COVID, and it's still right in between. Even things are changing now about vaccines, about PCR tests, and it's just different. I just saw today that Israel, which is a company that was very strict about vaccines and things, just did away with their PCR tests. You don't even have to test when you get there or before you leave. Same thing with England. Dr. Frank Sabatino, his significant other Janie is in London, and she can travel there now. He can travel back and forth without restrictions. So again, people are a little more comfortable traveling. The Baja cruise was the first trial after all of this, and so some people were hesitant, but enough went to make it a great time.
Well, I'm sorry that I missed that one because there was a time when I lived in San Diego. So I've always wanted to do that cruise around Baja and see you come around Sea Cortez, right? All the way
Yep,
through. So,
exactly right.
too bad.
I'll tell you what, if you get back to San Diego, right before my wife went on the cruise to lead the cruise to Baja on the Sea of Cortez, Wanda and I spent a week at Dr. Furman's retreat in the hills of San Diego. And if you really want to treat you and the good doctor to a great time, you visit Dr. Furman's retreat, the Eat to Live retreat in the hills. It's one of the most beautiful places you'll ever be. This is like a healthy canyon ranch. It's just the air is beautiful, the weather's beautiful. You're a hop, skip, and a jump from La Jolla Cove and Laguna Beach, and it's just and again, your meals are beyond. So it's just a beautiful location, and I put it high up on the point cards if you find yourself in San Diego.
There you go. Okay. And we'll talk more about that because Dr. Furman is one of your speakers for the annual
He is
conference.
indeed. Yep.
So you're going to give us a history lesson, Mark. And I'm very excited about this because I love to read. I enjoy learning about this world that we're involved in. So basically, you're part of the National Health Association, like we've said, but that was established in 1948. But when we think of like our heroes, and you've said it often, we think, oh, it was Dr. Dean Ornish who came up with this way of living, or Dr. McDougall, who is the one that I learned from. So we all have the individuals that have impacted us. But you've been around much longer, preaching a much cleaner diet. You're going to tell us your story of how you were raised pretty much as a raw foodist. So how did that come about? And then tell us about who the true pioneers are.
Sure. Well, I think that most people think that the whole food, plant based health movement began when T. Colin Campbell kind of wrote the China study and invented the term whole food, plant based. And he said it wasn't perfect because, as we know, plant based potato chips are plant based, marijuana is plant based. But to differentiate vegan, which didn't necessarily mean healthy and things like that. He needed a term, and so it was a pretty good term, and we still use it, and I think the world uses it now, and we just try to refine it a little better. We say 100% whole food, and rather than plant based, whole plant foods rather than plant based, because again, just for the limitations of the term. But most people, again, I think that when in 2010 or 2011 when Forks Over Knives came out and featured Dr. Campbell, who had written his book a few years earlier. This is where it all came from. But one of the great prides of my life is that I grew up in an organization called the American Natural Hygiene Society that was led by pioneer physicians like Dr. Herbert Shelton, Dr. William Esser, Dr. Chris Curcio, Dr. Robert Anderson, and then people that they inspired a little later on, including today's Dr. Alan Goldhammer and Dr. Joel Furman, Dr. Frank Sabatino. They all kind of came out of this health movement. But this is like 1948. This is 74 years ago. Next year, we're going to be celebrating our 75th anniversary. And from the very beginning, they didn't use until Dr. Goldhammer coined the term SOS free. It was a nice terminology for the world to use, but our organization, Whole Foods, meant whole foods. Meant you ate more live foods than even cooked foods. You didn't have oil, salt, sugar. These weren't foods. These weren't whole foods. These weren't peppers and tomatoes and cucumbers and things like that. Now, obviously, science evolves a little bit, but our organization really has been the torchbearer for this movement for a very long time. I think what has happened and what's given great credibility to the movement is that Dr. Esselstyn, Dr. Campbell, Dr. Ornish, Dr. Barnard, and of course our own Joel Furman and these MDs, articulate spokesmen. They've written books. They're great spokespeople for this health movement. Have given us a credibility that we never enjoyed. Dr. Shelton, Dr. Esser, these guys that were part of our health movement simply had their observations. They had health retreats where people went and they'd engage in water fasting and put them on a vegetarian diet, and people got well. They just observed it, that they got well. They knew it empirically. But now, through the work of Dr. Esselstyn and Dr. Furman and Dr. Ornish, they've documented what these people knew. So who is Mark Huberman? My parents were early pioneers in this movement, not as doctors, but as adherents. They just, why do some people, as I'm sure you've been doing these podcasts for a long time, why do some people just get it? And some people, and so many people don't. So many people, my late great father used to say, that most people don't worry about their health until after they've lost it. But even that isn't always the determination. How many people do we know have a heart attack and then go back to smoking or go back to drinking and things like that? But there are people that the light goes off. They just see the wisdom of the logic, the science, the health, the humanity, the beauty of it all. That were my parents. So 1948, 49, 50, to recognize those principles, they were way ahead of their time. and they became members of the American Natural Hygiene Society, now called the National Health Association. And they would go to these annual conferences, and they'd be around like-minded people, and they'd be around charismatic people like Dr. Shelton and Dr. Scott. They'd read his books. Now people read the books of Dr. Furman, and they read the books of Dr. Esselstyn and Dr. Barnard and Dean Ornish. There's so many great spokesmen, but these people were just way ahead of their time. So my parents, being way ahead of their time, had their own health issues, overcame their health issues. I come along. They were real, almost religiously enthusiastic about this way of living. So that's how they raised me. And they raised me at a, I look back on it sometimes in amazement to be raised on raw foods. Even to be raised as a vegan was a little, unique, but to be raised on raw fruits and vegetables in 1951, 1950s, 1960s, there were no salad bars around, there were no Whole Foods, but we were a great family. My parents were just, they don't, when they make parents, they don't make it any better than I was blessed with. And they loved me and they knew what was best for me, and they took me around a long line of people. And so I would go to these conferences. I grew up not knowing anything else but this way to enjoy life and enjoy eating. And then as I attended our conferences and was around growing up with Joel Furman and Alan Goldhammer and Michael Clapper and meeting all these people, they affirmed, as I got older, I was able to realize myself that science was documenting the way that I maybe grew up kind of religiously or just as a belief. Now it's validated, and that's pretty personally rewarding. And so I guess I like to say that I'm going to be 71 years old at our conference this June. Um, I don't think I look 71. I don't think I act 71. My new grandchild doesn't think I act 71. Um, so I think I've been blessed with pretty good health. I don't make a claim that I'm going to live to be like Methuselah. No guarantees in this world. We all have our limitations, but I think kind of in this era of COVID where everybody talks about immunity, I think I've been building my immunity my whole life. And I'm optimistic that every day the choices I make are extending my life and are going to give me the best shot with the foundation that I was born with. And I make those decisions every day. So again, I live, just as a footnote, I lived 32 and a half years on raw fruits and vegetables. No baked potato. To this day, never had a piece of pizza. Never had a glass of milk. I never had a piece of fish. I never had a hot dog at baseball games that I loved to go to. Didn't have my first cake until I was about 65 years old for my birthday. My wife made me a Kathy Fisher uh, healthy carrot cake. But I consider myself really lucky. That's all.
Yeah. So I don't remember if you mentioned why your parents made that decision, and was it just yourself, or did that include your siblings as well?
My parents had health problems, like I mentioned. So many people, it's a health crisis. My father worked for a guy who was an ardent vegetarian. My father was a boxer, a very athletic guy, and one day, with my older brother, collapsed with polio, and he was diagnosed with polio and told 1949, 1950 he was never going to walk again. That wasn't acceptable to my father. This guy, Ben Blumenthal, who owned a furniture company that he worked for, said, "Hey, Max, why don't you come hear this lecture of Dr. Shelton and Dr. Benish in Cleveland, Ohio?" They did. It made sense. Again, why does it make sense to some people and not others? I don't know. But they bought a vegetable juice machine. They got a slant board. They started exercising. They opened their windows, got fresh air, pure water. And like everybody, it was a path, but it made sense. My mother had some thyroid and some appendix issues. My brother had bronchial asthma. So the whole family was kind of a little bit of a train wreck. And then I come along in 1951. My parents were really newbies at all this. And one of the crazy things that they didn't want to do was give me cow's milk. And even crazier, they didn't want to vaccinate me. And in 1951, not wanting to do those things was pretty controversial. The family put a lot of pressure on my parents, on extended family. My mother was trying to nurse me, at least so the story goes. Her milk spoiled. I developed projectile vomiting. I got really, really sick, almost died. Went under the care of this Dr. Benish, who thank God was in Cleveland at the time. He took me, my parents under his wing, got me through that crisis, put me on that path. and the rest, as they say, is history. And because I survived and seemed to thrive, you don't mess with a good thing. So that's why my parents did what they did with me.
Incredible. Having had those 32 years of experience as a raw foodist, eating raw foods, what are some of the recommendations that the National Health Association makes when it comes to how much raw food should be in our diet?
Well, I think for the same reason that I did not continue on a raw food diet is that I think what I realized when I was 32 years old that there are very few physicians that recommend a raw food diet. Number one, it's difficult to sustain without some starches in your diet, without some, it just can be difficult to maintain weight. It can be difficult to maintain satiety, I think, for people. But again, is it necessary? And I think the better thinking is there are some foods that just really you can't consume raw. I mean, kale and spinach and things like that. I guess you can put spinach in your salad. I do. Kale, unless you massage it with some avocado or something, is a little bitter. Certainly, you can't eat legumes, split peas, and you're not going to eat split peas raw. And I guess you could sprout peas and things like that. But there are things that you just can't. And so I think it is not necessary and is not always effective. That being said, I think Dr. Furman and everybody else would recognize that live foods, fresh fruits and vegetables need to be the lion's share of what you're doing. Dr. Furman likes to say, it's one of my favorite phrases, your salad should be your main course. That's what you should have, your salad, and not a lentil salad, not all, in the vegan world, a little personal gripe that I got is salads don't mean salad. Salads mean almost everything but romaine lettuce and cucumbers and celery and tomatoes and things like that. You go to a vegan restaurant, you're hard pressed to find a salad. But in the National Health Association, if you come to our conferences, if you go on our cruises, a salad bar is a real salad bar at every meal with lettuce, all kinds of lettuce and sprouts and things like that, fresh, whole, live foods. And I think the better science says today, that's where your phytochemicals, that's where all these factors come from. That should be the lion's share of your diet. So even though I still have a cooked meal every day and probably would go to bed hungry if I didn't have a Japanese yam or a sweet potato or some split pea soup or something at night, salad is still the main course for lunch and dinner. I'm kind of a fruit and oatmeal guy in the morning, but even there, my old buddy Dr. Benish used to say that you should have some celery and romaine lettuce with all of your meals. Chef AJ would say, you want your vegetables in that for breakfast as well. And again, we all have our habits, but the main point is that I think we recommend in the National Health Association and what we try to demonstrate at our conferences is that you need to get a high percentage of your diet should be the cruciferous vegetables and fresh and whole and live. And that's where the best enzymes and the best nutrition is. And for anybody who fights weight problems, when you fill up on a salad, as long as you don't lace it with the wrong kind of dressings and things like that, and croutons and all that other kind of stuff, you won't have any weight problems filling up on a salad. Just
Yes.
won't. It
Yep.
won't. You can eat all you want with no guilt, and you'll do just fine. So again, we're not a raw food organization. We've never been. We have stood for the proposition that the more whole foods, whole plant foods you get into your diet, the better you are, and without added oil, salt, or sugar. That's the optimal gold standard. We know everybody's on a path, not everybody's there, but we at our conferences we go to set the gold standard and show you not only you can do it, but it can be enjoyable and satisfying and tasty and all that. But not everybody's there. And it's not a crime because you didn't grow up 32 and a half years like Mark Huberman did. That's just, everybody's a little different. And everybody's blessed with different constitutions. One of our doctors, Dr. Nathan Gershfeld, says sometimes, how strict do you have to be? You have to be as strict as your body requires. Some people need a little more than others. Just the way it is.
I've heard you say that there are, plenty of healthy recipes out there. We see Chef AJ always making some sort of delicious salad. So let's talk about the conference. So, When, if we can back up a little bit, when did you get involved with the National Health Association? So early on, you started attending the conferences. At what point did you decide you're going to get more involved, join the organization, the association, and then, be part of the conferences and everything else that you do now with the magazine as well?
My parents started sending me to conferences. I think the first one I can remember was I was 10 years old at a hotel, the Pitt Congress Hotel in Chicago, Illinois, and they actually put me up as a speaker. As a young guy, I was kind of a novelty. They'd never met anybody who was, been born on raw food since birth, and so I had this iconic picture of my speaking at the American Natural Hygiene Society with Dr. Shelton in 1964 or 63, and that was pretty special. When I was 18 years old, um, again, I'd been going to these conferences, for year after year with my parents, and I was always I've always been kind of a leader type guy, even in my community. I'm involved in lots of community organizations and things like that. So they thought I was kind of an interesting guy. So I got on the board of directors when I was 18 years old.
Wow.
And I went to undergraduate school and then law school. And when I graduated from law school, there was some organizational turmoil, like every organization, like a lot of organizations go through. And in 1977, I believe that I became the youngest national president of the American Natural Hygiene Society when I was like 23 years old, something like that. And I really never left. And in 1978, a year into my first year as president, I always thought that people needed something for their a bang for their buck for their membership, and so I invented, was part of the creator of what we now call what is now Health Science Magazine. It
Mhm.
actually, I'll show you here. It's kind of over my shoulder, but here was this was the first issue of Health Science Magazine, published in 1978, and you'll see there was a very young Mark Huberman, looked a little different in those days. I interviewed Dr. Shelton, but the interesting thing that has not changed about that magazine is that it is a very unique publication. I don't know of any like it. It's 40 pages long. It has no advertising in it. It is just articles. Every issue has a feature interview with some of the deans of our health movement, the leading voices like Neil Bernard, Michael Greger, this most recent one with Dean Ornish. It's a pleasure for me to get to know these people, but to share their lives with our people. There's recipes in each issue, but it's not a recipe magazine. If you go into a health food store or Whole Food stores, and you pick up Forks Over Knives or any of these really nice magazines, they're mostly recipes because that's what people like. We have recipes in every issue, but there's 5 or 6 or 7 recipes by SOS free chefs. So Chef AJ, Kathy Fisher, one after the other that we feature. So it is that. Then there's testimonials. There's in-depth articles on various subjects. There's Q&As. It's a nice mix, and people tell us um, often that it's the only magazine they read cover to cover because it's just an interesting mix of inspiration and education. And again, as I'm sure you can attest, Maya, you look at the magazine, this is as high a quality a magazine that you'll find on the newsstand. I mean, we don't scrimp on paper, we don't scrimp on photography, we don't scrimp on anything. It's very expensive and it costs way more than the $35 that's included in the membership to get it quarterly. But we're able to do it because people donate to help us publish it each year. We do an annual appeal and people do that. And obviously our membership keeps growing. If you look on the back of each magazine, we list all the new members just since the last issue on the inside of the back cover. I'm sorry.
Yes.
And it's
Awesome.
300 or 400 between every publication from all over the country. These are real people. Their cities where they live, and so again, I'm real proud of the magazine. It's I think it's one of the best magazines on the planet, and we really work really hard to make it interesting. And again, for $35, when you join the National Health Association, you get that actual magazine in the mail quarterly. And when you register on our website, when you become a member for that same basic $35, you gain access to all 44 years of back issues for nothing. You can just download them and read every issue. So it's a pretty good deal. And there's also When I said about the history of the American Natural Hygiene Society and the modern whole food plant-based health movement, even our organization, the founders of our organization, were inspired by people that wrote in the 18th and 19th century, what they call the natural hygienists. And there are ebooks on the history of that health movement that are also available to download for free when you become a member, on the rich history of this. Sylvester Graham, most people know him as the graham cracker kind of guy.
Hmm.
But Sylvester Graham was really one of the fathers of healthy living and healthy and having fresh air and open windows. And talk about when they had the cholera epidemics in New York, people went to the Graham houses and they got
Hmm.
well. They didn't die from cholera. And Isaac Jennings, who was one of the first guys to work with water fasting in the 1830s, and Russell Troll, Dr. Russell Troll, who ran a big clinic in New York, wrote a book called The True Healing Art, a lecture that he delivered on healthy living to the Library of Congress and the Smithsonian Institute. So it's a rich history. That's our legacy in the
Hmm.
American Natural Hygiene Society, and now the National Health Association. When you become a member for that $35, you gain access to all of those resources for nothing. So it's a pretty good deal.
I love how you feature people in the community. So, Dr. Colin Zhu was on the podcast recently, and I saw that he was being featured in your magazine.
Oh,
And so I said, "Well, look at that!" Like, I'm familiar with his work. I listened to his podcast, but the way the article was so well written and gave me sort of more of an insight to who he really is. I think that's when I became more intrigued, when you have certain guests, certain people that are featured in the magazine, they share that through social media. And then suddenly I'm interested. And so, and as a matter of fact, I wonder if we can talk about that, because you did say, being that NHA is going to celebrate next year its 75th anniversary. And I've heard you say, despite all of this that you've been doing and you are the gold standard for this way of living, not too many people have heard of NHA. Why do you think that is?
sure. I think we really have been the best kept secret. I think that's changing because, again, social media is an interesting phenomenon. You have an ability to reach people like you do through your show and so many others that you couldn't do. You couldn't do in old days. It was. I remember when we were planning our conferences back in the day. It was print magazine. You could advertise in Vegetarian Times or the East West Journal or one of these legacy publications. But it was really, you were getting the true believers. But you couldn't, now you can reach worldwide anywhere you go. And so again, we are growing significantly, and part of it is what's that old phrase? My glory is that we have such friends. On our board in the last couple of years is Dylan Holmes of Well Your World. Dylan has a remarkable follow. Chef AJ, of course, has been with us for many, many years. And when Chef A gives a shout out to anybody, it's a big megaphone that she's got. And we go way back with Chef AJ. And the same thing with Brittany Giroudi. If you've ever watched the Giroudi family, Brittany's a member of our
Yes.
board now. So Tammy and Tom Kramer of Nutmeg Notebook. These are all really good friends who are talking about us. So again, as evidenced by all the new members we keep getting, we're not such a secret anymore, and uh, really rewarding to have that, to enjoy that kind of growth. And we also do our own. We just started our own a Power Your Health Q&A, a monthly podcast where we have a you can call in. We use a StreamYard platform. People can call in, post their questions, and talk. And so we have one. We did Dr. Stefan Esser last month. We're doing on the 24th of May. Dr. Christy Funk. She's really neat. And so on the fourth Tuesday, it's usually the fourth Tuesday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, you can register on our website for free. You don't have to even be a member, and you get to interact with these people. And so we're doing what we can to even become more well known. We'd like to be as famous as Dr. Greger, but the more we interview Dr. Greger, the more he talks about us, the better it gets.
Okay, so your website had it's like a hub full of so much information. So you talk about your conference there. It's the information for the conference and upcoming events are found there. You have recipes, you have information on traveling, which also includes the cruises. Let's talk about the conference, because there's a virtual component to it, which is very exciting. Now, if you're not able to travel or feel restricted or still feel concerned about traveling this year, you can now sign up virtually. So, what can we expect for the conference this year? And I believe it's in June.
Sure, June 24th to 26th. But we tell people that if you can come, you come on Thursday the 23rd because we offer like a bonus session where we have actually Jane Esselstyn coming Thursday evening, Caldwell's daughter. She's an amazing RN and an educator and really inspiring. And so she'll be there Thursday night. And then when you're there Thursday night, you're available Friday morning because, again, one of the things we do to make it a really inspiring weekend is that we last year took 4 buses of people to the beautiful Cleveland Metro Parks, part of the Cuyahoga Valley National Park system. That so we do a hike on Friday morning, and then people come back to the hotel. The conference gets going on Friday afternoon, so it's a great way to kick off the event. Cleveland is the only city in the country with a national park. The Cuyahoga Valley National Park system is in there, and there's just breathtakingly beautiful areas. So we'll do that. We have some great speakers this year, in addition to people we have every year, people that kind of, again, their heart and soul of our movement are Joel Furman and Alan Goldhammer and Frank Sabatino and Stefan Esser. This year we've added Dr. Columbus Batiste, the cardiologist, who's
Oh,
amazing. Brenda Davis, if you've never met Brenda Davis, Brenda's as good as it gets, as articulate and inspiring a presenter as you'll ever find. So we have all those speakers in addition to Dylan Holmes and Brittany Giroudi and all that. So it's a great time. You have a great year. And one of the other interesting things is that a deal we have with the hotel. So our meals at the conference are Friday night dinner, breakfast, lunch, and dinner on Saturday, breakfast, lunch on Sunday, and then go home. But if you come early or if you stay late, the hotel makes NHA compliant meals, essentially the same meals we offer at the conference, but you get them in their restaurant a la carte. So you decide what you want. So you don't have to run out to Whole Foods. You don't have to bring a cooler for your room. You can forget about that when you come to our conferences. It's really good. So this year, to come to our conference, we're one of the most affordable conferences you can find. There are still tickets available for the live conference of $665. It includes all your lectures, all your meals, and that for the weekend. But if you can't, and the hotel is only $139 a night at an Embassy Suites. It's a beautiful, beautiful hotel. Handicap access, by the way, handicap accessible for everyone. If you can't, we just offered a virtual option. But the virtual option, which I think is $97 through May 21st, and then it goes up to $129. With that, ours is a little bit different than the typical virtual hybrid conference that you watch on Zoom. What we do with ours is that we do a lot of interactive stuff so that if you're part of the live audience, you'll be on beforehand, you'll be on after, during breaks. I'll go out and interview one of the doctors you're talking to. You can post your questions to them yourself. I take you through the lunch line. You can't eat virtually, but you can see how we do it and the kind of meals we have and meet the people that are there. So we try to make it really interactive. So you're not just kind of sitting there like you're watching a TV show. Our goal is to make it really interactive. And then for that same $97, you also get the right to the replays of all of those lectures for at least 6 months. We say 6 months, but last year we never shut it off. So, and they're posted on Vimeo. So it's just like watching YouTube. So you use your username, password, you can watch some, you can come back to it, and they're all just posted as a series. So, and we also, in addition to the lectures, there's food demos, exercise classes. We're having John Pierre, if you know the legendary JP. JP will be doing an exercise. You'll be able to follow his class
yeah.
right there, and learn how to use stretch bands and things like that. So it's a very engaging sort of live stream replay option rather than just a virtual conference where you could just watch lectures. It's a little bit different. We did it last year for the first time. The reviews were really good, and then we were newbies. We were rookies doing it last year. Now we know a lot better, and the hop-in platform we use is pretty interactive. So again, they can go to healthscience.org. You can register for the live conference. You can register for the virtual option. And again, you'll see on our website not only all the speakers, but you'll see the entire conference schedule is there too. So you'll see what the doctors and other presenters are talking, what subjects they're going to address, and so we think that it's a pretty. We're veterans at doing this. You know, the holistic holiday at sea has maybe been around when they were doing it before COVID, maybe 6, 7 years, something like that. We've been doing it since 1949 was the very first conference. So the NHA has been doing these things for a long time. And my wife Wanda has done the food and she's been the conference planner. We've been doing it since 2017. So we're pretty good at this game
Yeah.
and we give people a good time.
Now, this is the first time that I've seen that children can register. This is impressive.
We do. How special is that? You asked something before about, I remember early on you asked me about what do you tell people about live foods, fresh foods? Well, my wife and I are blessed to have our first grandchild. And her parents are not vegan, they're not whole food plant based, but they're inspired enough to know, well, my wife, we babysit a lot, particularly my wife. So we have the opportunity to do something pretty special that I think all the doctors in the NHA, Dr. Furman, Dr. Esser, all that have raised children themselves would say, it's really important early on to introduce your kids to live foods. Get them oriented to strawberries and blueberries and bananas and not baby food out of a jar, but make your own, mashed banana and things like that and let them learn that. I think that's the secret of how I stuck it out this long. Chef AJ once said when I interviewed her, what was the secret of how you withstood all the pressures of conformity in the world and all that? She said, if I write my book, I should call it "Don't Get Started," is the way I should call the book, because I think if you don't get started on these on chocolate and all these kind of all these pleasure trap tastes, your tastes will be oriented in a different direction. So there's no better joy that my wife and I have right now than introducing our 9-month-old grandchild to strawberries and bananas and broccoli and yams, Japanese yams, and that's just great. But I think it's more than just our pleasure and more than just the nutritional foundation that she's getting, but you're getting taste oriented from early on. It's so sad that in school today, the old joke about vegetables are ketchup, are considered vegetables, relish and all that. That's not how we want taste to be oriented. We want kids to learn melon and mangoes and all these wonderful, wonderful tastes. So it's a recommendation that we have to parents raising young children. Get them oriented. You can control, as somebody once said, you can control what you do in your house. You can't necessarily control what kids do when they go off to school, and you don't want to have neurotic children by, being the police. But if you set the good foundation at home, make them learn the love of fresh peas and tomatoes and cucumbers and avocados and things like that. Well, you let a pretty good foundation. So that's what we preach in the National Health Association.
I love the idea that they'll have exposure to hundreds of other people and adults to see that they are not the only ones, living
Right,
this
you're not an
way.
oddball.
Yeah.
Right, you're not
So
an oddball.
and you
Right.
can attend a conference with your parents and, vice versa, that families can come together and learn together. So I love that you're supporting children. This is so cool. There's a documentary that I saw on Netflix. I don't know if it's there anymore, but it was called The Children's Menu. And I am a former school teacher. And so for me, it became very important when I learned that children really want to be involved in the kitchen, especially they want to be able to be, to help in doing the groceries and the prepping of it all. They love the idea of gardening. It's just that I think sometimes we always, and you said it, there's that the kids menu in certain restaurants where it's all the junky, processed, nutrient deficient food. Why should they eat differently than we do when we're eating clean? Why are we not promoting healthy dishes to children? So when the children are on board, yeah, send them to a conference. That is awesome. You have different groups. So you have like children from ages 2 to 12, and also then from 13 to 16. Do you also have activities for them, separately?
We have a room just for kids. Obviously, everybody eats together, which is a different experience. But we have this is again it's in a very nice area, so they go on hikes, they do activities, they do. We have the other thing we do that's just kind of neat is that so Vitamix is one of our sponsors. We have gifted chefs like Brittany Giroudi and Dylan Holmes, so they come and they do demos and workshops with the kids just for them. So they make ice cream, they make that kind of stuff. And the doctors, we have the doctors also we schedule them to spend time just with the children. So again, it's not their parents talking to them. It's a little bit different, and we find that pretty meaningful for kids. And we had probably 10, 11, 12 kids last year of different ages. And so we have a kids coordinator and, but it is, it again, I think that's part of the reason that, that I grew up in this movement because I grew up with
Yeah. I think you're
Joel.
probably the only conference in this world that we live in, whole plant-based foods lifestyle that is supporting children. I don't know of anybody else that's doing what you're doing.
Yeah, I think Summerfest, the vegetarian Summerfest that they did for years in Cleveland did foster a lot of children. Obviously they're not anywhere near as narrowly focused as we are on health. There's a lot. Summerfest was like an umbrella for lots of different things, but they did nurture children, and that was a good thing. They did. I mean, but other than that, I agree with you. I'm not aware of anybody else in this space that does
I want to encourage our listeners to really look into this and send this information to, the conference information to anyone that you think may benefit. If they have children that are already on board, this is a wonderful way to support them. I also see that you have other physical activities, like kind of like you were saying, even with your cruises, they're active. Well, here you have walks, guided walks, you have chair yoga. So there's that physical component. Because a lot of times when we go to conferences, we sit. And so you have the physical movement aspect to this. This is wonderful.
Dr. Clapper says it's the food. Well, it's a little more than just the food. It is, the food is a lot, but you really do need to move. You need to exercise. You need balance in your life. And so we try to touch all those dimensions um, during our conference and with our children and all that. So it's also a priority of ours too.
So in and topics that you cover, like you mentioned with Dr. Baptiste, who's a cardiologist, he'll talk about a cure for a broken heart, meaning just heart disease. And then a topic on really protecting ourselves against cancer and COVID, because that's a conversation. COVID is a conversation we're just going to continue to have. I'm really supporting our immune system because that's the key, right? If we have a healthy gut, a strong immune system, our body is able to fight some of these conditions. And also cooking demos with Dylan.
Everybody likes
Those are my favorite. Well, this is amazing. And so registration is open now, and the conference takes place June 24th through the 26th.
By the way, it's the Embassy Suites in Independence, which is a suburb of Cleveland. It's like a 5 minute or 10 minute Uber from the Cleveland Hopkins Airport, which is an international airport. The hotel is in a lovely area right next to a Top Golf. If anybody knows what Top Golf is, it's a fun activity. If you've never been to Cleveland, there's the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. There's the Great Lakes Science Center. Cleveland's a neat town, and the parks. So if you want to come early and stay late, the $139 hotel rate applies to a couple days before and a couple days after. So if you've never been to Cleveland, used to be called the Mistake on the Lake, but it's not anymore. Cleveland's a great town, and so you'll really have a nice. It's a nice area, and the hotel is lovely. It was renovated a few years ago, but if you've ever been to Embassy Suites, one of the nice thing about them is that all the rooms are suites. So you all have a mid-sized refrigerator. You have two rooms. So if you're coming with a guest, there are literally two rooms. There's a fold-out couch. The all the rooms are like an atrium. Again, I mentioned the handicap access of this. There's usually like an atrium in the center. And one of the things they did when they renovated this one a few years ago is that it used to be a bunch of steps you had to go up and all these barriers, and now it's all on pretty much on one level. So it's a lovely, lovely hotel to be. It's a lovely area, and I think people have a great time.
I think so. Yeah. It looks amazing. And so also I'm interested in kind of this partnership that you have with We Did It Health. They're going to have a sort of a summit as well. Is that in conjunction with your
It's
conference?
it's on Thursday during the day of the conference, and Peter Goldstein is it's the kind of the brainchild of a guy by the name of Peter Goldstein, and there's a bunch of wonderful speakers he's bringing in, trying to create ambassadors to get the world to get 1 million vegans within near period of time, and so he's got some wonderful speakers coming in for that, and those people obviously can stay over for our conference as well. But it's a nice gathering for that day. It's a separate registration for that event, but it's not expensive, and it's you go to wedidithealth.com, and he's a good guy, and his speakers will be at our conference anyway, so it'll be real nice.
Pretty cool. Just one last thing. Well, I have a couple other things before we wrap up, but can you give us a little insight as to what people can expect if they decide to do the Alaskan cruise? Because I have my eye on that one.
Well, I can only tell you that Alaska, like the Galapagos, has always been on my bucket list. Baja was always okay, go and swim with dolphins and things like that. But Alaska is like the last frontier,
Right.
and the Galapagos is just extraordinary. And so again, this is an active river cruise. So you're going up, not a river cruise, active cruise up whatever the place is, and there are side trips to the Denali National Park, which my wife and I plan on doing after the cruise for a few days. And so Alaska is just beautiful, and you have lots of options that you can do. Again, the difference between what this is and what a lot of cruises are. You're just not going to a port and go to Charlotte Amalia if you go into Nassau and go to the trinket shops and things like that, and then get back on the ship and have your entertainment. This is seeing Alaska. This is exploring glaciers and Alaska's extraordinary wildlife. And that's what it's been on my bucket list for forever. And so to be able to do it and not have to worry about my meals, that's sliced bread, sliced whole wheat bread, organic whole wheat bread. It's really good with mashed avocado on it.
Yeah, and sometimes you think of some cruises where people solely only go to eat. Like their idea is, buffet style, eat all you can eat in one sitting and then lounge around, have a drink here or there. No, this is about us taking care of ourselves and embracing what nature has to offer.
Right, on our cruises, they are not. Now there may be in Alaska, maybe a lecture, but that's not. I don't even think so. Our Baja was not a lecture.
Mhm,
Our river cruise was not a lecture. This is healthy vacationing.
mhm.
This is the lifestyle. It's not. That's the other difference between that and holistic holiday. Again, you're not going to have all these stars of our movement there that to inspire you, which is a great, it's an extraordinary thing to be in the presence of Michael Greger and Michael Clapper and all these incredible people. That's not what our cruises are. That's what not our travel is. Our travel is about the lifestyle. Maybe it goes back to a core philosophy that I like to always talk about who Mark Huberman is. I always like Joel Furman's, the title of his book, Eat to Live, rather than, and it's in contrast to live to eat. I think when people go on cruises, it's almost they live to eat on the ship and all the entertainment. Ours is eat to live. The eat is the fuel to do these wonderful to see the world and see travel, and that's kind of how I've been my whole life. I've never looked at um, my 32 and a half year old raw food diet or anything as anything more than that fuel to allow me to enjoy life to the fullest. I love baseball. I don't go to baseball games to eat popcorn and Cracker Jacks and things like that. I do take my peanuts and I take my you know seedless grapes and an avocado sandwich or things that they'll let me in with. But that's why I go. I don't go to eat as so many people do, and I don't travel that way either. And I eat to live, and part of our travel, and that is to enjoy all that life has to offer: theater, sports, the arts. That's who Mark Huberman is. And I've often said that if people ask me, um, if people don't ask me what I eat or how I live or what I think about health, I won't tell them. I'm not a proselytizer about what I do. If people ask me, I'll talk all day long, and I'm very proud of and thrilled to share what I know. But I don't proselytize about that, and I think I try to do it by example. That's what I've always done my whole life. I think it's a much more successful way of getting people to follow, whether it's religion or politics or anything else. And so, again, I'm much more. Although I've lived this rather unique upbringing and still live a rather unique life, that's the smallest part of my life. I mean, I'm involved with my synagogue and with my our local community theater and corrections and magistrate education and I love to go to New York every chance I get to see Broadway shows and I love to travel. That's what I love, and food just gets me there.
Right. Yeah, I mean, we're so much more than the food, but it feels so good to be around other people who respect and are, believe in the same things when it comes to food. So, I agree that, and I said it earlier that the vegan cruise I went to in 2019 kept me very busy. Yes, I got to meet my heroes. I was able to take a photo with Chef AJ and, all the people that I admire. But I can't say that I actually met people that on my level who I could stay in touch with.
It's a really people that come to our conferences. It's a reunion. It is. There are people that when I said how we don't get invited to dinner.
Yeah.
Well, we people that with the conference that have become longtime members of our association. They're few in between, but we have some of our best friends in the world are in Pittsburgh, where Brittany Giroudi and some other family members are. When we go to Cleveland, we have just great friends that have become lifelong, and you do share on a very special level. And certainly, when you come to the conferences, you're having lunch with. And by the way, when you talk about meeting your heroes, seeing your heroes, another unique thing about our conferences is that Joel Furman and Alan Goldhammer and Frank Sabatino and Stefan Esser, these people who grew up in this organization like me,
Hmm.
this is coming home for them. So you're eating lunch with them. You're they're in the audience just like you. You're sitting there, you're likely to be sitting there, you're standing out in the lobby waiting for the next thing with them. They're taking the exercise. Joel Furman's leading the exercise class. It's just it's that kind of experience that's much more personal than just sitting in a hall receiving a lecture, maybe getting a question answered. It's very much one on one. We're very much part. We try to really keep it as part of a family and a community. That term gets overused, I think, sometimes, but we really are. And people do come to our conferences. That's the experience that they enjoy.
We are living in a time where we actually miss each other. Like, I've signed up for a few things. I'm looking forward to coming back together with people in general. I just feel very deprived because of the pandemic the last 2 or 3 years. Also, I wanted to add as we I want to mention how people can become members of the organization, the association, but I want to mention that you also highlight members through a link that you have on testimonials. So this was really cool because obviously I see a lot of familiar faces, but it's very different in the sense that people are able to share their story in a beautiful platform here. In a great format. And so you have everyone. I mean, you have so many people that I'm familiar with, like Brittany's on there and Tammy Kramer. So, yeah, how can people become a member? And you said for $35, you get 4 issues, I think.
You go to healthscience.org. It's the name of the magazine. That's our URL at healthscience.org, and you can sign up for $35 is for 1 year. That price probably hasn't been raised in probably 25 years, despite postage, despite everything else. It's been the same $35, and there's always a tension because the magazine costs probably about $12,000 an issue to produce. $35 doesn't quite defray the cost of the magazine, but again, our members believe in what we do and try to get the message out there. So they support us, but we've kept the price low. So for $35, if you join for 2 years, you save $5. It's only $65. If you want to do a little more, you can become a member of what's called the Century Club. You pay $100 a year. And if you pay $100 a year for 10 years, you become a life member and you never have to pay again. Or if you make a $1,000 one-time payment. And in each issue of the magazine, people like their 15 minutes in the sun. And we try to highlight those people that do step forward, become a life member, become a Century Club member. And we often, like you say, we often invite them to share their stories, their testimonials, and we archive all those on the website. So it's not just you see it in the spring issue of the magazine, you see a story about somebody, and then if you don't keep your magazine, it's gone. They're all archived on our website. And one of the things I was going to add that's similar to that is that when you read the interviews that I do, what I try to do in the interview, and I do all that's the feature interview is kind of what I do in addition to being the executive editor. I try to when I interview Michael Greger, or just now with Dean Ornish, I try to everybody will likely hear what he says about how to reverse heart disease and what his program's like. I think people are more interested in who they are, what their inspiration is. And when you read, I mean, it was an education for me about the Swami and Dr. Ornish, and you read how he was suicidal. And he runs into this guy. It's not how you'd think of Dean Ornish. And I do the same with whether it's John McDougall or Michael Grever or Caldwell. I like to not only bring out and share the extraordinary wisdom they have about our health and insights, but who they are. So in the upcoming issue, I just did my first edit of the interview with Will Bulsiewicz, the gut doctor, and he's just an interesting, fascinating story as to who he is, where he came from, and why he does what he does, and what his family's like. So I try to make the interview a little more in depth, and people say that if there's one nice editing skill I got is that I bring out the best in people that way. It makes the interviews engaging so that, yes, you could watch a podcast. There are podcasts galore with all these guys. This is a little bit different. And you can have it, you can read it again, you can read it again, and again. Boy, there's an old saying that when you go to a seminar, if there's one thing you take away, that's a successful seminar that you attended. So if you learn something a little bit more to connect to Caldwell Esselstyn or Dean Ornish, it's a different relationship. So that's what we try to do with the magazine. And by the way, I believe that people should be able to look before they leap. If any of your listeners wants to learn what the National Health Association is about, they want to see Health Science Magazine, if they email me at mhuberman@healthscience.org, my first initial last name, healthscience.org, I'll send them a free PDF of the latest issue of the magazine. They just, for nothing, electronically. If they like it, they like what they see, and they want a print copy, although this last issue has proved wildly popular with Dean Ornish. It's not going to last very long because he is the dean, and I've had a run on the bank for this issue, but I've got plenty of other issues. But I would be happy to do that.
Mm-hmm.
To send people a free PDF electronic copy. You'll see the quality of it, and then if you like it, you join. And if not, your horizons have been a little more broad.
Yeah.
That's all.
Well, I definitely love your approach. It is true that we're used to hearing that certain doctors tell their lecture pretty much their perspective on lifestyle and
Yeah.
disease. When we get to see another side of them, it's actually amazing. When I've heard you say, especially when Dr. Campbell, he wrote the China study and he was part of the way there, but he not fully on board. So I did not know that because that's something he doesn't mention very often. Yeah, you talked about how he went to True North and then kind of detoxed and went through the whole thing. And then so suddenly I'm seeing him with new eyes.
Can you imagine Dr. Campbell writes this groundbreaking book is with a great title. He's about to go on to speak and he can't speak because he had been exposed to dioxin and had a swelling of his tongue and his mouth. And he came to one of our conferences and met Dr. Goldhammer, met Dr. Burton and some of our leading guys. And they said, maybe you could try this because his interest at the time was just animal protein and the danger of animal protein and societies with animal protein or plant-based protein. He didn't really have the bigger picture of whole plant foods. And he evolved, but by going to our conferences, so that was, I agree. When I interviewed him about it, I wondered whether he'd even want to talk about it because it was, kind of an embarrassing personal thing. But not only did it, but he did it as a badge of honor. But I think it was really uh, enlightening and interesting for people to read about where did he come from? How did his thinking evolve? That's what we try to do with Health Science Magazine.
I love that. It makes him more relatable to us, like more human. Like, oh, he also had an issue. He wasn't just the doctor, the scientist. Like he went through his own personal, and like you said, it could be in some sense seen as embarrassing, but a difficult situation that he overcame. And True North was part of that recovery, and then that moved him along to now understanding really whole foods. Like,
He wrote a great book called Whole, which
yep,
really could have been written by Dr. Shelton and Dr. Bennett. That is the essence of this health movement that, we have so much of the world is focused on reductionism and trying to find, well, how much of B12 or calcium or getting this factor or that factor. He said, don't lose the big picture. Don't lose
yep.
the big picture. That's what he's to me is a legend in our time.
So, any plans for the 75th anniversary of the association?
It just dawned on me, believe it or not, my wife brought it up to me about a month ago that, hey, this is going to be our 75th year. And I just, with all the crazy things we're doing, it didn't even dawn on me. So we are in the stages of that, but it's going to be quite a celebration that you're going to
Yeah.
want to be at. It's going to be the place to be. And I think in our health movement, the giants that Michael Clapper and Neil Bernard, and all of these
Mhm.
people had the first platforms where they got to speak were at the conferences of the American Natural Hygiene Society, the National Health, because there were no other forums. We were the place where people, the health reformers gathered, the faithful gathered every year. Now, obviously, they've gone on to do great things, but I think they're going to remember their roots, and I think they're going to be happy to be with us to celebrate our rich heritage in 2023 at the end of June.
Yeah. It's fascinating to see this whole full circle thing happening with different people along the way, different influencers and physicians and people who are sharing the message in different capacities. And to know that NHA has been a significant part of all of this, like really the foundation of it all. It's amazing. So yeah, we're gonna have to be at that one at the 75th
You
anniversary.
certainly
So
do.
yeah. Is there, Mark, anything else that you'd like to share with my listeners? I'll include all the links in the show notes, but do you have like a final message or even why they should become a member of the organization?
Again, I think we have an extraordinary heritage. We have principles, we have standards, we have not wavered from that. Tell me another organization that doesn't sell anything but information and education. We don't have 18 CD or DVD sets. We have our conferences. We have a magazine that doesn't have any advertising in it. We've been 501c3 since 1969. Um, Donations to the NHA are tax deductible because our whole mission has been about education, and I'm just so proud that we have adhered to those standards uh, from the beginning. I think there is you're really be part. I think you're becoming part of a great legacy and a great heritage when you're a member of the National Health Association, and you can rely on the fact that the speakers that you'll hear at our conferences, the writers that you'll see in our magazine, and the recipes that you'll see published are gold standard. Again, not that everybody has to become, 100% a raw foodist or a vegan or SOS free overnight. But we're going to set the standard out there for you, and we've always done that in the National Health Association. And it's probably the privilege of my life to be in my retirement to be able to do this and to share it with my wife Wanda, who retired from her long time job as in the insurance industry with a very large insurance company, to become the executive director to do what she loves after her transformation that people can read about if they go to healthscience.org and you look at the fall 2016 issue. You'll read the Wanda Huberman story that I think you'll find is as inspiring as everybody else. And she and I have been married 31 years, and she is looks younger than when I married her. And not only just younger than when I married her, but healthier than when I married her. And it's just to be able to share this together is great. And to be able to share this, I guess the last thing I'll say is that maybe the greatest reward of my life is not just sharing, what I believe in and all that in the organization, but that I've had the privilege of, of calling as friends and colleagues the Joel Furmans of the world, the Alan Goldhammer, and seeing when I see Joel Furman on public television, that's a that's a moment of great satisfaction that these are my friends, my colleagues, and to be able to share and help showcase them and give them even bigger platforms, everything I can do, that's pretty rewarding at this stage of my life.
Yes, I love that. And by the way, I love the gentle approach that you took with your wife, Wanda, that she was not necessarily fully on board, and you believe more in living your life and being a role model and living your truth. And she eventually came around, also went to True North, and here you are, both of you working together in partnership as a married couple, but also in partnership to offer all of these resources to such a broader audience. Okay.
Like
Yeah.
you. We're both very lucky.
Yeah, very much
Joel and
so.
Herman are very lucky. Alan and Jennifer are very lucky. Caldwell and Ann are very lucky.
Yeah.
John and Mary McDougal are very lucky. So those of us in this space that can share that,
Mhm.
we are really lucky. We really we count our blessings every day
I
that we can
agree.
do that.
Very much so. Mark, it's been a pleasure having you on the show. I hope to meet you in person soon.
At our 75th.
Yes. Thank you so much. You've been listening to the Healthy Lifestyle Solutions podcast with your host, Maya Acosta. If you've enjoyed this podcast, do us a favor and share with one friend who can benefit from this episode. Feel free to leave us an honest review on Apple Podcasts. That helps us to spread our message. You can also head on over to podinbox.com/HLS to leave me a voicemail. Don't forget to subscribe. And as always, thank you for listening.